If you're on the lookout for somewhere luxurious to learn some history and spend your time in Paris, then the Palace of Versailles could be right up your street. Cemented as an official royal residence of the 17th century, the building grew and prospered beyond the small hunting cabin it was meant to be to the glorious and extravagant chateau it is today. We're dedicating today's post to delving into the history of the palace itself, as well as 10 facts that you may not have known about Versailles. Built in 1624, the Palace of Versailles is a royal chateau built in what eventually came to be the city of Versailles. It was initially built as a small hunting lodge but has had considerable expansion since that time. King Louis XIV was in charge of the construction of the Palace of Versailles, whose motivation was to outdo the Vaux-le-Vicomte, which was built for Nicolas Fouquet, interim ruler of France at the time. Versailles was then established as the symbol of aristocracy in France. King Louis XIV often invited the nobles to stay at Versailles, with the aim of reducing their power and gaining direct rule over France. Despite the luxurious and wealth that came with the palace, it cost almost a quarter of France's national income to maintain everything within it. The Palace of Versailles is an opulent complex and former royal residence outside of Paris. It has held sway in the public imagination for years because of its architectural grandeur and political history. To the public imagination, Versailles is the epitome of opulence, said Louise Boysen-Schmidt, a Denmark-based writer at This Is Versailles. It represents an age in French history of both France's rise as a fashion and power center as well as the dramatic, and bloody, decline of the monarchy. Located about 10 miles southwest of Paris, the palace is beside the settlement of Versailles. The town was little more than a hamlet before becoming the seat of royal power. By the time of the French Revolution, it had a population of more than 60,000 people, making it one of the largest urban centers in France. Inside the palace, Spofford notes that the palace contained about 350 living units varying in size, from multi-room apartments to spaces about the size of an alcove. The size and location of the room a person got depended on their rank and standing with the king. While the crown prince got a sprawling apartment on the ground floor, a servant may have nothing more than a space in an attic or a makeshift room behind a staircase. Louis XIV's bedroom was built on the upper floor and located centrally along the east-west axis of the palace. It was the most important room and was the location of 2 important ceremonies where the king would wake up and go to sleep surrounded by his courtiers. The king also had a ceremony for putting on and taking off his hunting boots. According to Schmidt, to our modern eyes, Versailles is a perfect example of Baroque and Rococo architecture. But, said Gudek Nadar, the French of the time would not have considered it Baroque. And it's understandable why, she said. It's very different from, for example, Italian Baroque architecture, which served as an inspiration for other European countries during that time. Having his palace evoke Italian Baroque architecture would have angered Louis XIV. It would have gone against his sense of absolutism, said Gudek Nadar, the belief that he is at the center of everything. In fact, Louis XIV fired a famous Italian architect hired to work on the Louvre Palace, which was built not long before Versailles. Some art historians now call the style of the Louvre and Versailles French classicism. They possess somewhat different features than Italian Baroque architecture, including the emphasis on symbols of power and timeless domination. Other types of Baroque architecture featured symbolic art, but not necessarily with the emphasis on divine right, kingly power and timeless rule. Everything in the Versailles of Louis XIV had a symbolic meaning, said Schmidt. The ceilings are adorned with illustrations of Roman gods with Louis XIV himself painted as Apollo, the sun god. Throughout the palace you will find the intertwined L's of his name. It all serves as a constant reminder that he is the king and all power comes from him by the grace of God. The decoration also emphasized the achievements of the king. The Hall of Mirrors and the adjacent salons of war and peace were decorated with the history of the king, said Gudek Nadar. The Hall of Mirrors has 30 tableaus that depict an epic story of Louis XIV's achievements and aspirations. Victory in battle features prominently in these narratives, with one example showing Louis with his army crossing the Rhine River in 1672. He is dressed in Roman clothes, his long hair flows behind him, and he holds a thunderbolt like a projectile. He sits like a god in a chariot that is being pushed by none other than Hercules himself. The Hall of Mirrors has played host to plenty of splendor over the years, with the room originally being lit by as many as 20,000 candles to transform it into a quarter of light during special occasions. but it has also been a witness to some of the most important moments in history, the most significant being the signing of the Treaty of Versailles. The treaty was the most important of the peace treaties that brought World War I to a close, ending the state of war between Germany and the Allied powers. It was signed on June 28, 1919 in Versailles, exactly 5 years after the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand that directly led to the war beginning.